so much for coming out to the first Creative Mornings of the year. And before I get into this talk, there are some things that you need to know. I'm Sharna, I'm 37, I'm 5'7". This talk is going to be surreal. I was thinking about delivering it from behind the pole, but I'm not. I'm going to step in forward and talk. I am the artistic director of Site Gallery, and I've been in position since July 2018. And in this very room in 2016, I had an exhibition here called Playground, which Emma Cooper, I mean, everybody knows Emma Cooper, don't they? She gets everywhere. That we worked on together, and that was in this room. And honestly, since then, I've been looking for a way to get back to Sheffield. I've been part of the Children's Media Conference for about 7 years, and then I joined the board of DocFest. So I've been on the board for DocFest for about a year. So in addition to my work at Site Gallery, I'm also a writer. Somehow I've managed to have a parallel career. These activity books came out in 2014, just as I'd left Tate. I'd been there for 7 years, creating and curating a platform called Tate Kids for all your children's art needs. And then I've just finished a novel. It's the first in the series, apparently, but I don't know how I'm going to do it because I barely made it through this one alive. It's called High Rise Mystery, and it's out on April 4th, and it's about a pair of sleuthing sisters who find a body in the trash chute in their estate in the hottest summer on record, hence the working title, Shoot to Kill. Planning and prepping covered my living room for the best part of 2018, and the bit I'm showing you is actually the neat bit. The rest of the house was like one of those murder investigation rooms that you see on TV, just like scrawls and scribbles and threads everywhere. So in addition to this book, I've started scripting a preschool animation series with a company in Finland. The show is called 1001 Animals, and it's based off a picture book. My key contribution thus far has been, guys, crazy suggestion, but why don't we turn that guy into a cat? And that's gone down really well. In addition to working, I've got this healthy and all-encompassing obsession with Dutch barges made before the 1950s. And this is my ship, Anna Maria. I bought her in Rotterdam in November 2014, and she crossed the channel on her second attempt in 2015 to a town called Faversham, which is in Kent. She's now back in Rotterdam, because chiefly it's better than Faversham. And that felt like a homecoming, and also the mooring fees there are cheap as chips. And it's really hard to find moorings for a boat of that size in the UK. The waiting lists are super long, and the fees are astronomical. So yeah, this really dark video shows you nothing, but it gives you a bit of a tour of what the boat's like. She was launched in 1897, so she's 122. She's just shy of 30 metres long and 5.5 metres wide. She's my third Dutch barge, fourth boat overall. We don't talk about the other one. And I lived on boats in London for 8 years, and there's a whole of a presentation to be had on barging woes that I won't bore you with. Also, I have a bit of an unusual family setup. I live with my dog, Margot. She's about to be 10, my son Joseph, soon to be 9. We live with my ex in a house in Hunter's Bar. So we're basically roommates, works together because no one wants to be with us romantically anyway, because we're all super boring. But it's a really great situation, and it works out really well. So I'm looking at your faces, and I can guess what some of you are thinking right now. You're thinking, oh, this is going to be one of those super smug talks where a girl from London comes up and she's like, oh yeah, you can have it all. Look at me with my hipster boat and my quirky non-man situation. I don't have it all at all, far from it. For a start, I barely sleep. I vape constantly. My room looks like a crack den with bottled water. I took a photo of it last night to show you. I spent 15 hours on Reddit one day. There was a time when I was writing the book that I would only eat at McDonald's around 4 o'clock via Uber Eats every day, and that was it. And then I had the audacity to wonder why I looked like shit. So it's not the case. I'm telling you all of this. I'm telling you about my frankly bizarre life choices. And what's driven me to be determined to carry them on actually stems from a key moment in my life. And I want to say it started at 17 minutes past 12 on September the 2nd, but actually that was kind of the midpoint of the process. What happened was my mum died. So this is her name is Sharna Jackson, and she was born on 16th of July 1959 and died on September the 2nd, 2010. She got cancer in her gallbladder of all places, which spread to her liver, and unfortunately, when you get cancer in your liver, it means game's over for a lot of people. So diagnosis to death was about 6 weeks, which in hindsight, through this surreal lens, was a good death, I'm told. So it wasn't a complete shock, and it wasn't too prolonged. This is like the best photo of her that I've got, and I had to get it resent from my brother because I've lost all my stuff. And this was taken at my graduation, and I've had to cut my hungover ass out of that picture because nobody needs to see that. So that's my mum. And then this was the last picture I took of her with Joseph. That's my son, a few weeks before she died. So I was 28 when she died, and Joseph was born 6 months before she went. And in a way, I felt like I was a victim of some cruel one in, one out joke. But I'd always had a really interesting relationship with death, and prior to my mum dying, the two women in my family who I was most like one died at 31, she's my cousin Melanie, she died of an asthma attack, and at 55, my paternal grandmother. I think she died of cervical cancer, but I'm not sure because my dad is like the official keeper of unnecessary secrets, so nobody really knows what happened. So I would average their ages up and say, well, if she died at 31 and she died at 55, well, that means I'm going to make it to 43. Then hopefully my mum will keep going, and then that will raise the average up. But nope, she died. And that's what, you have to be careful of what you speak into the world. So, surreal begets surreal is the kind of the crux of this talk. Surreal begets surreal to me means that those bizarre, dreamlike situations I found myself in, for me, have led to more of the same random situations, which I actually really like. And I'm super fortunate that my grief manifests itself in a way that's a catalyst for both personal change and creativity. And I know that that's obviously not the case for everybody. So I feel quite fortunate to be able to be up here cracking jokes about it, to be honest. But there was a lot of things that were interesting and quite funny about that entire process. And I really took charge of the dying process and the funeral. In a family of what seems like 1,000 people, it was me that had to step up and do it, and basically because I didn't trust them to do a good enough job. And people say you go onto autopilot when you're grieving, but for me it wasn't the case. My process was like, if you're going to have a funeral, we're going to have the best funeral that you've ever seen. I'm going to run it like a project. I was like Sheryl Sandberg, leaning into that. I was all in. And so the entire process was filled with the most surreal moments, as you can imagine, and they force you to get creative. And I want to show you some of the ways that we got creative during this process. And these include, but not limited to, I had to make visual menus for my dad to make sure he was giving out the medication to my mum in the right way, because I caught him just giving her pills willy-nilly. So I had to make sure that he knew what was what and when it had to be given out. And then the order of service, like my brother is a graphic designer, so I gave him a bit of bleak work experience, I suppose. He did a really good job on this, and it was filled with loads of personal touches that not everybody got, but we really did. So the illustrations on the cover are super random. At the top left is Jeremy Brett, Sherlock Holmes. That was like, she loved Sherlock Holmes, but only the Jeremy Brett version. That's a cat up the top, Maddox. Bottom left is Madame Bijou. And Madame Bijou is a character from the Titanic. I don't think you actually see, but she's talked about. She's talked about as this opulent French woman who's got this penchant for jewellery and drapes herself in jewellery, and that's what my mum aspired to. So that became a family nickname for her. And at the bottom right is an actress called Thandie Newton. I don't know if you know her, but my mum's just like properly obsessed with her. So we put her in. And then on the inside cover, like she used to drink like mugs of tea that were like huge, like buckets. And she used to be obsessed with this guy called Richard Chamberlain, who was like Dr. Kildare, what was it? Thornbirds? Yes, this is, yeah. Everyone's too young for that. No. So she was, we were super into it. doing that, and I'm really proud of my brother's work on that. And also, get my kid to try out headwear. And then we went super hard into the gravestone process. So this was like the most epic saga. And I think this was like pre-Pinterest, but I became really obsessed with looking at gravestones and fell in love with Peter Savile's gravestone for Tony Wilson. And we were like, that's the pinnacle of headstone design. Let's do it, but let's do it Luton. So we set out to copy it, and that was like our first mock-up, and we were like, that is so fresh, like this is going to be amazing. But it didn't turn out like, nah. We went in and we were like, angles, creating mock-ups. Spent $3,000 on this thing, and you know what? It didn't come out that nice. Look at it. It looked nothing like the proofs. Like, the font is terrible, it's too close to the right, oh, I hate it. And the thing is, I've never actually been to see it in person. I just, not into it at all. And but it caused the biggest family drama ever. Her parents and her siblings were not into it at all. They, when it went in, it takes a couple of years for you to be able to put in a headstone. And I heard it got put in, and then I kind of, stepped back away from the drama. But my brother was living at Luton at the time, and he said, they came round and they were like, you made her look like she died like a pauper with that bleak headstone. You're so selfish, look at it. Where's the flag? Where's her picture? And but I don't talk to them anymore anyway, so it's fine. Yeah. And there's loads of things that happened that make me smile and laugh about that time and period. And here's a little list of things that we went through. Finding catering for 500 people, which was so ironic because my mum mostly hated people. She liked about 7 people at best, and then 500 people turned up to her funeral. She would have she would have hated it. And then catering for 500 people, but then not eating anything, not being able to get to the buffet. And then I remember being really mad with the vicar because he didn't black out the church in the way that I needed him to for my slideshow. And it made it look really amateur. And I was so mad. And then, when I was testing that very same slideshow, there was, on my old MacBook, there was an autoplay function, and it would assign itself to a song. And the song it assigned itself to was Don't Dream It's Over by Crowded House. I don't know if you know that song. And so every time, when you hear that song now, when we played it in the house, everyone, broke up in tears. So every time I hear that song, it feels like I've been punched in the throat. But I do love it, so it's painful. At the funeral, somebody fainted at the back of the church, and we had to get an ambulance for them. That was iconic. And there were people singing and dancing as they left the church, like it was a party. And speaking of parties, between the time of her death to the funeral, we'd have people at her house every day, just drinking and smoking until the early hours. They were basically using this morning period as a pre-game before they went out to other clubs. And it was really weird. I heard this one guy on the phone yeah, come over to Pam's. Yeah, they've got loads of whiskey, yeah. And it was oh, okay, great. That's interesting. I remember wearing what I wore to the funeral was just really inappropriate in the end. I wore a too tight, too short skirt. I was still carrying my baby weight and was in denial about it. And I had to just pull it down for the whole day. And then another thing was my dad made us do this super cringy thing where at the end of the funeral, he made us all stand around the coffin and hold hands. And that wasn't a thing that we did. It was really weird. And then I got drunk and really cussed my family. And then I had a crush on the funeral director. And then I had a crush on my dad's friend, who we called Hot Clive. But his name wasn't even Clive, it was Greg. Sorry, Greg. And then getting told off by my dad for driving around Luton with Hot Clive. And he was like, he'll get you pregnant and leave you, is that what you want? And I was like, well, why are you friends with somebody like that anyway? So it was so funny, and this gift for me just sums up the entire experience. It was cracking me up, it was bleak, but it was funny. But honestly, I didn't know at the time, but that process has been one of the most defining moments of my life, and it really brings home all those cliches and pop lyrics about life being short and time is fleeting and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, according to my averaged out death age, I've got 8 years left, so I better spend them well. So for me, that's about trying to do all the stuff that I love and has meaning and has value. And if it goes wrong, oh well, I learn from it and I'm going to die anyway. So with that in mind, I wanted to just flesh out some of the things I told you about earlier. So my boat, being involved in the barging community is both brilliant and bizarre. And boats seem to bring together people in really interesting ways. And one of the best things about boats is their histories, and you're able to trace them back from their launch and research owners and find out what they were originally designed for. And with Anna Maria, this was the day I went to see her and I decided that I was going to buy her. It was death that made her available to me. The owner, Deirdre, had died, also of cancer, and her family had put her up for sale as it held too many memories for them. I met his daughter, Kiki, who told me what it was like to grow up on the boat and what it was like losing a father at a young age and what that meant to her. I also spoke with his widow, and she would tell me about the stuff that they've left on the boat for me. Because when you have a boat, you don't move all the stuff out, you pass things on. So she would tell me about the wheel that they brought together a few weeks before he died and the original drawings of the plan and how it was such a mission to get them, how great it was that I was getting them. And in the end, the family basically gifted that boat to me, I think due to our connection. I got it for like a third of the price. And it was because we both were going through a similar thing. And then last November, in 2018, I got this really random email from the owner of the boat before Diedrich, before the guy who died. And he's an Amsterdam-based journalist called, I can shout. He's an Amsterdam-based journalist, everybody, called Ton Gautier, and he reached out to me to say that he'd been in Rotterdam for his birthday, and he'd seen Anna Maria in the harbour, in Oudehaven it's called, and he couldn't believe that she was back in the country because he knew that she'd been taken to the UK. So we had emails and emails and emails. Could we meet? Do you want to talk about boats? And then he was like, what would you say if we became boat partners? I can help you, and you know, I want to get back into boats and you're in Sheffield. And I was like, yeah, right. Boat friends, you know, our family. So I Googled him to make sure he wasn't a scammer, obviously. And it turns out he wasn't. And this is him on my boat with his son 18 years ago on Anna Maria. And at the time when he reached out to me, I'd had a whole survey booked and I had to go over to take him out. So we kind of like had this like non-sexual rom-com moment where he met me at the airport and we like drove to the boat and we fixed this cooling system, and at 4 a.m. the next morning we got the boat out of the water, and at 5:30 in the morning I'm sitting in a porter cabin on the dock in Rotterdam in ripped jeans because I overstretched like trying to get off the boat when it was out of the water. I'm drinking coffee, which I never drink, with loads of Dutch dudes just being really Dutch around me, and I'm like, what choices have you made that have like how is this your life? And it was like, oh well. But it's really good, and this super random relationship with Tun and Wolf is like turned out to be great. So they basically just hang out on my boat and look after her for me, and they spend loads of time together bonding, doing the things I'm unable to do or frankly can't be bothered to do when I go over there, which is like change pumps, change the cooling system, varnish stuff, rebuild. So they're like a dream, but sometimes I have to admit I'm quite envious of the time they're able to spend on my boat without me. So like he'll message me and be like, oh yeah, I've had a really good day on your boat today. Now I'm just going to watch a movie and chill out and stay over, and yeah, and I've drank all that coffee that you bought that I cussed and da-da-da. And it's like, oh, you're watching a film in my house without me. But I'm really grateful because, yeah, they're sorting me out and they're brilliant. And with my book is playing a really small part in a campaign for change. Like a really tragic fact that probably is completely mirrored in the arts is that 4% of the publishing workforce in Britain is non-white. And even worse, in 2017 there was a report that came out that said that out of the 9,000 kids' books that came out that year, only 1% of them had a BAME character, which is a complete disgrace. So these two people, Amy and David, set up a company called Knights of, and who are publishing my book, and they've left Scholastic to be dedicated to more inclusive fiction, where ethnic minorities aren't stereotypes or forced onto the sidelines, but given accurate representation. So it's been really great to work with them. And it's been super surreal with the support process. The book has been edited by this lady, Robin Stevens, who, if you have a kid, you might know that she's like the most prolific writer of mystery for kids. She's ace. And then on the right is my agent. It's like, oh, I've got an agent. Isn't that funny? Who is like really supportive, and they're super behind the cause, and they're using like their privilege in such tangible ways to make such a difference to children's publishing. And I love working with them, and it's been great. And so this Read the 1% movement is really gaining traction, and Knights have created a pop-up in Brixton, which has now become permanent due to significant media interest, support from Lambeth Council and Penguin, who have chucked in tens of thousands each. So I'm hoping that this book, although, you know, it's 51,000 words of pain, but I hope it makes some change and someone out there actually likes it and inspires somebody to do something else. And then, getting back to Sight Gallery, my baby, my true love, I hope I'm not wrong when I say this, but I think I might be the only black female, I put young because I'm not young artistic director in the country, and one that doesn't run a space dedicated to showing works of people of colour, which is, yeah, great for me, but that's terrible. I'm dedicated to audience development and participation, and I want people from all walks of life to come to Sight. But when they come, they need to feel comfortable. And I fully understand how daunting it can be for some people to cross the threshold of a gallery. You know, why comes to a space that makes you feel stupid? You know, life is too short for that. So the team and I, we're working especially hard on our programs and our communications to make sure that we are accessible as possible. This year is our 40th year, and it's going to be a good one. You're all invited to the preview, 15th of February. Come through. Not everybody's going to love it, and that's okay. We can only control the controllable and be zen about the rest. I wasn't always this chill about work though, and I think that's one of the reasons I ended up here. And I just want to tell you a quick last final story. When I was at Tate Gallery, I was on compassionate leave when my mum died, so I developed this platform, Take Kids, which I came up with and I ran. And I was like obsessed with it in a way that wasn't really healthy. I loved it. And I decided to check my emails when I was off, see what was happening. And I see that they launched some new brand guidelines. You know, they had a new director of media. You get new directors in, they want to change the world. You know how it goes. And what they did, they took my brand. I had two of these brands of mine. So Take Kids was mine and Families was mine. And they just put X's on them in a brand Bible. And then I open a brand Bible while I'm off, and I see that they're cussing. I was so incensed. I was like, this is my opus. How dare you slap me in the face? And I know how dramatic that is, but I think I was channeling my grief into this. And I loved Tate. It was weird how much I loved it. It was like a weird relationship. So I started cheating on him. And so I just started cheating. I was like, that's it, you don't deserve me. And so I just started working with everybody else, setting up my own things, and just basically working everywhere with the hope that I could consolidate all of that learning and all of that experience and funnel it into a vision that I could then apply to an institution. And here we are. So that's great. So, Surreal begets Surreal. And I think grief can be a real catalyst for change and creativity. And life is too short to not live it how you want. And I know that sounds like a Ronan Keating lyric, but that is absolutely true. Thank you very much.